Well, good evening, everyone from the Indiana Council on World Affairs, and welcome to our final Distinguished Speaker Program of the 2021-2022 season. We are recording this evening's program, and tomorrow we'll post a link on our webpage so that you can take a look at it again or share it with a friend. My name is Larry Cimino, and I'm the volunteer president of the Indiana Council on World Affairs. And on behalf of our board of directors, it's my pleasure to welcome you to this evening's program, Solutions for Today's Hunger Crisis and Preventing the Next One, featuring our distinguished speaker, Dr. Laté Lawson-Lartego from Oxfam America. ICWA is an educational, nonpartisan, nonprofit organization with an all-volunteer board, and we hope that we are always presenting timely events of international importance in a format that promotes respectful dialogue and exchange of ideas on a wide range of topics to help you make sense of the world. Speaking of timely events, you may have seen that the US Senate overwhelmingly approved $40 billion in aid today for Ukraine, which also included about $5 billion for international disaster assistance, which is part of an effort to stem the disruption to the global food chain and to address the global hunger crisis that's bearing down on vulnerable peoples in many countries brought on by war, or famine, or forced migration, climate change, inflated food prices, etc. Now, we are a membership organization, normally hosting live speakers at live events. And while all of our programs are open to the public, we'd like you to consider membership and meet us in person for dinner, a beverage or two, and lively conversation about US foreign policy and foreign affairs. We reconvene after the summer hiatus in September, and we'll be in a hybrid format to welcome you back in person from 2 years of isolation, or to continue reaching you via Zoom. Your too long isolated self wants you to join ICWA, and if you don't join us, then join something, because it's good for you to join something and get involved. The Indiana Economic Development Corporation is our season sponsor. The IEDC is committed to attracting and supporting new business investment, creating new jobs for Hoosiers, and furthering Indiana's reputation as a top state for business. I also want to thank all of our donors to this program. Every contribution helps us deliver on our mission, and all contributions made to this program will be shared with Oxfam America and the Indy Hunger Network. Some of you have been very generous today, and we thank you very much. Now, later this month, we'll circulate an annual report to all of our members and a slate of candidates for next season's board of directors and officers for our organization. So you can let me know if you'd be interested in volunteering for a seat on our board to help us continue our 68-year unbroken history of presenting programs that help make sense of world events. Now, although this evening's presentation concludes the season's Distinguished Speaker Series, we hope to offer several events during the summer to give us opportunities for informal gatherings, especially for the international lunch and dinner tour programs at some of the excellent ethnic restaurants in our city. So now, after the initial discussion this evening with our distinguished speaker, we'll open the floor to your questions, and we do encourage you to participate in the Q&A by using the chat button at the bottom of your screen. So please direct your questions to Ian McIntosh, who is our interlocutor this evening. And some of you have already sent questions, which we'll address as time permits. So to begin this evening's program, we are delighted to welcome Mr. Jim Morris, who is Vice Chairman of Pacer Sports and Entertainment. Jim is a longtime community leader, having served in local government, as well as for the for-profit and nonprofit sectors. From his early role as Chief of Staff for Mayor Richard Lugar, he went on to the presidency of the Lilly Endowment and then to serve as chairman and CEO of the Indianapolis Water Company. But most apropos to this discussion, Mr. Morris served for 5 years as the executive director of the United Nations World Food Program in Rome, where he led the world's largest humanitarian agency. It's in that capacity that we are so pleased to welcome Jim Morris to offer a few words of welcome and to share a few of his thoughts on why Hoosiers should care about global hunger, as well as the food security that exists right here in our own backyard. Welcome, Jim. Glad that you could join us this evening.
Thank you, Larry. My pleasure. A special privilege to be with you for so many reasons. you've mentioned the success in the Congress today of the supplemental appropriation bill that will provide really substantial additional dollars to address hunger in the Ukraine, but around the world. It's also significant that today, this month of May, the United States is serving as the president of the Security Council at the UN. And when a country has the privilege of leading the Security Council for a month, they have the opportunity to choose a subject that they consider to be among the most important issues facing the world. And I am so pleased that President Biden and the Secretary of State and the ambassador to the UN from the US chose the issue of food security and violence. And that has been the topic that the Security Council has been focusing on, including quite an extraordinary debate today on the same subject that is relevant to our conversation tonight. It's an honor to be with Dr. Laté. Oxfam is one of, if not the most respected NGO in the world, and a remarkable history of providing ideas and resources and commitment to address hunger everywhere. And then to have Dave Miner, Dr. Dave Miner, longtime Eli Lilly executive, and Dave was the national chairman of Bread for the World. And Bread for the World is the most significant, successful faith-based advocate for hunger, for addressing hunger in the United States and abroad. My own belief that addressing hunger is the fundamental need in the world to address all of the other problems that are on the world's humanitarian agenda and have no chance to be addressed or to be successful unless we live in a world where our people are fed and nourished and are prepared for all sorts of other opportunities. Hunger is at the basis, as everyone knows, of healthcare. The hungry child has no chance in school. My friend, President Obasanjo of Nigeria said, Jim, a hungry man is an angry man. And hunger is at the base of conflict and violence. But it's also the basis of bringing people together. I doubt that there is any single issue in the United States or maybe the world that people unite around other than the notion that nobody wants a child to be hungry. All of the great faiths of the world have a commitment to addressing hunger at the top of their faith scriptures, agendas to make a difference in the world. Republicans and Democrats in the United States all agree that a child should not be hungry. They may have a little difference of opinion, not too much, on how it ought to be addressed, but it's a unifying theme. And for that, I'm very grateful. Hoosiers are people that love their neighbor. Hoosiers are people of great hospitality. And, hospitality is more than being a friend to a group coming to your community. Hospitality in the scripture always focuses on making more room at the table for the hungry stranger. And Hoosiers have played really quite a remarkable role in addressing these issues. My friend, and I miss him every day, Dick Lugar, served in the United States Senate for 36 years, was a leader on the Ag Committee and chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee. And he was the author, along with Senator Kerry of Pennsylvania, for the Global Food Security Act. And that act is now up for reauthorization. It passed the last time, sort of in 5-year cycles, overwhelmingly in both houses, both parties, signed by President Trump. My hope is that that will repeat itself with support from President Biden in both houses of the Congress. But our Hoosier Dick Lugar led the way. Todd Young, our senior senator from Indiana, has been brilliant in bringing Republicans and Democrats together as chair of the House Multilateral Committee, the Senate Multilateral Committee, bringing members of the Senate together on issues related to South Sudan, Somalia, Yemen, Ethiopia, and other troubled places. So Hoosiers have provided leadership. Hoosiers care deeply about this issue. Dave Miner has been brilliant pulling the Indiana Hunger Network together to cause Indianapolis to be a city without a single hungry child. And that requires the public and private sector, great participation with SNAP, WIC, the school meals program, but great support from food banks and other private sector, some faith-based, some not, some secular. So in my judgment, to be a city, to be a world that cares about its children, you feed that little girl in Malawi and make it possible for her to go to school, everything changes about her life, all for the better. And things ultimately get better in Malawi. And so the unifying notion of being certain that we have no hungry children in the world, that we do this together. Mother Teresa said, if we don't have peace in the world, it's because we forgot we belong to each other. And that goes a long way for me. So today's a glorious day with the success in the Congress. And I know you all will focus on issues related to the Ukraine, but just to put this once again in perspective, the Ukraine and Russia provide a third of the world's wheat supply. They provide half of the wheat supply of the World Food Program. And once again, in context, 60% of the hungry people in the world live in an environment of violence and conflict. So there's a lot to think about. I often think we ought to spend a couple hours every day just in prayer, but working on world hunger, local hunger is critically important to building the kind of world that we want. So Larry, thanks for pulling this together. My friend from Oxfam, thank you for being a part of our Indiana program. And Dave Miner, thank you for bringing the focus to our backyard, where we found a way to get very close to being able to say we don't have a hungry child in Indianapolis. Thank you for allowing me to be a part of this. Good luck.
And thank you, Jim. I appreciate you making time for us this evening. There's probably no one else in Indiana with as much experience in this area as you, or is capable of putting the issue into perspective such that we understand why this is important for all of us. So thanks again for being with us, and you have a good evening. And now, now our interlocutor for this evening is Dr. Ian McIntosh, Director of International Partnerships at IUPUI and an adjunct faculty member in philanthropy and liberal arts. He's the founder of the Sacred Journeys Project and the Indianapolis Spiritual Trail. He's the author of a recent book called Pilgrimage, Walking for Peace, Walking for Change, which is available on Amazon. And he's the former managing director of the global indigenous rights group, Cultural Survival Incorporated. And Dr. McIntosh is a member of the board of directors of our Indiana Council on World Affairs. So welcome, Ian, and thank you for handling this interview. Would you please do us the honor of introducing our distinguished speaker for this evening?
Yes, thank you, Larry, and thank you, Jim. As Larry said, our distinguished speaker this evening is Dr. Laté Lawson-Lartego. Dr. Lawson-Lartego currently serves as Oxfam America's Global Program Director for Food Systems. Oxfam's goal is to create inclusive, resilient, sustainable, and healthy food systems for all. In addition, he is serving in an interim and part-time role as Director for Oxfam in Africa, to lead a change management process to bring all African programs onto one platform. Now, before joining Oxfam, Dr. Lawson-Lartego spent 17 years with CARE International in both Africa and the US. Dr. Lawson-Lartego earned a doctoral degree in business administration at Georgia State University with a focus on innovative business strategies and value co-creation. He also earned a master's degree in economics and business from the University of Lomé in Togo, and a second master's in social and rural development from Reading University in the UK. Dr. Lawson-Lartego has published many articles and book chapters, including most recently, Socio-Technical Innovation Bundles for Agri-Food Systems Transformation. So let's begin. Dr. Lawson-Lartego, can you get us started by speaking a little about the history and role of Oxfam as it relates to, let's talk about what's behind me here, the UN Sustainable Development Goal of eliminating hunger in the world.
Thank you so very much. I'm very grateful to the Indiana Council on World Affairs for inviting Oxfam and myself to be a distinguished speaker on the program tonight and to be among hosts from Indiana. The time is right, but the time is grave. Obviously, we are all sustained by food, but yet many people are facing famine-like conditions as we speak. I'm really passionate about these issues, and I have been working on it for many years because at some point in my own life, I was refugee, and I was lucky enough to get food aid to sustain myself and my family. So these issues is really close to my heart. And just to jump in, we have a short video that we would like to share just to give you a sense of what's going on around the globe on the hunger issues. Looks like we have some sound issues.
Sorry, I'll restart it. Didn't realize I was muted.
maalkii baa naga dhammaaday manfacba waa weynay guryihii baanu daadinay maxaydhada annakoo sukaa gawaadhi nala kaga soo qaday meel cudila la yidhaahdo halkanaynu ku degnay maxay dhahday dee sidii baanu ku joognaa.
Thank you so much. I hope this video just gives you a sense of the dire of the hunger issues we are facing around the globe. This one is from Somalia. And just to bring this again to perspective, we have a woman called Hafsa. Hafsa to migrate to a camp with her husband and 2 children. Yeah, that's the picture, in search of food. Her family lost all but 2 of her 150 goats due to the drought. It's also part of that in the video. And maybe you may ask, why goats? Goat for people like Hafsa is their life savings. That's probably their house or their 401k for retirement. So losing those goats is losing everything they have worked for their entire life. But Hafsa's story is heartbreaking but not unique. In 3 hard-hit countries in East Africa, Kenya, Somalia, and Ethiopia, over 23 million people face acute hunger. 23 million people in those 3 countries. So that's like 3 times the size of the population of Indiana. And the UN estimates that 350,000 children may die by the summer if emergency assistance does not reach those people in time. We just issued a report yesterday, Oxfam and Save the Children, and we estimate that across Ethiopia, Kenya, and Somalia, on average, 1 person is likely dying every 48 seconds from acute hunger. And this is linked to COVID, obviously, but mostly conflicts, climate issues, and more the inflation that we are seeing from the current conflict in Ukraine. So this tragic set of events is predictable. We knew as early as November 2021 that vulnerable communities in the region would face a difficult situation as they grapple with 3 failed rains in a row. So for farmers here in Indiana, you know what the difference having the right amount of water at the right time can mean for your crops and livestock. So imagine relying only on the rain for irrigation and then having those rain fail again and again. So Oxfam, can you show our Oxfam slides? Oxfam and many other organizations are responding to hunger in East Africa. But also now we are responding in West Africa because there's another growing famine crisis over there. And also outside of Africa in countries like Yemen, Afghanistan, and many more. Oxfam has been fighting hunger for many years, and that we believe it is part of our DNA. And I want to thank Dr. Jim Morris for shouting out to Oxfam. The name Oxfam comes from the Oxford Committee for Famine and Relief, which was founded in Britain in 1942. When I was a student there, I had the chance to volunteer for Oxfam, and I never knew I would work for them. The group campaigned for food supplies to be sent to an Allied naval blockade to starving women and children in enemy-occupied Greece during the Second World War. This description also makes clear that the Oxfam model combined both direct community-level support, but also with campaigning and advocacy. And we are pleased actually by the votes today, the $5 billion that the government now has passed to support global food aid, because we have been advocating a lot about those issues. So since our funding, we have expanded significantly our understanding of the drivers of hunger and poverty. This has resulted in an expansion of areas of work. So in our current strategic framework, we have placed fighting inequality at the center of what we do. So this means for us creating just economies that are fair for everyone, but also seeking climate and gender justice, and pressing for accountable governance that protect human rights. Oxfam advocacy targets both governments, people in power, and companies who hold massive power and wealth. But sadly, too often, they do not play by the rules. So still our work on hunger, food insecurity, and agricultural development remain as relevant today as ever. We are fighting for trade and food system to be fair and sustainable. So this means we work a lot with small-scale food producers, women like Hafsa, so that they can earn a decent living, they can protect their investments, and they can thrive. It also means responding to food crises when those crises occur. At that moment, we are seeing a proliferation of crises that threaten millions of people and demand urgent response. What we are witnessing in hunger hotspots is a toxic mix of economic slowdown, conflicts, weak governance, and climate change. Obviously, the economic shock of COVID-19 resulted in a sharp increase in poverty over the last 2 years, making it much more difficult for people to earn enough money to provide nutritious food for their family. And the latest blow, as we just hear, is the disruption of wheat and sunflower, among other commodities, caused by the conflict in Ukraine. Prices were already going up, but now they have skyrocketed in the past 2 months. Let's see the FAO price index. As you can see on the slides, the price index reached at an all-time high in April 2022. That's the red line on top of the graph. So you can see how the price is really increasing. And around the globe, we see the heat. People are really suffering because of these issues. So before the rapid, you can take down the slide, thank you. Before the rapid run-up in prices, more than 800 million people, 800 million people. So that's about 2.5 times the US population. You can just imagine 2.5 times the US population. Those people suffer from chronic hunger. They go to bed hungry. And 193 million people are acutely food insecure. So in countries I just shared, places like South Sudan, Ethiopia, Kenya, Somalia, or in West Africa, more and more we are seeing countries like Mali, Burkina Faso, Chad, Niger, Nigeria. They are all seeing whole communities suffering famine-like conditions. So we are really concerned about women and young girls who are most at risk to hunger and malnutrition. We did a survey in South Sudan just to assess who really is impacted, and women reported that they are deprived of access and control over productive resources, land, finance, fertilizer, things like that. So most of the time, decision-making rests with men. So women and girls have been restricted to the care economy, where they carry out exhausting and time-consuming household tasks, such as going to collect firewood or water, because they don't have access to those resources in their proximity. So we see the gender gap is widening because of this crisis as well. So I look forward to discussing how we have arrived at this situation and what we should do now and in the future to make sure that this never happens again. But I do want to emphasize that the worst outcomes can be avoided. Oxfam is working every day alongside other international non-governmental organizations and the UN bodies such as the FAO, the World Food Programme, and obviously with partners on the ground who have decades of experience working in difficult conditions and hard-risk places. And in COVID, we have seen, because we cannot travel as an international organization, we have seen how those local organizations have stepped up to really respond to crises in their local context. And few things that we do are, among other, providing cash and food vouchers and in-kind food aids where necessary, along with water and hygiene and sanitary services. And we are working with farmers to ensure that they have the seeds, the tools, and all the other implements they need to prepare for the next season, while continue to pressure governments and private sector to prioritize investing in food and agriculture. So all this work is made possible through the generosity of people and government around the world, including right here in Indiana. So those are my few remarks, and looking forward to the question. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Lawson-Lartego. Yes, now you've partially answered my first question, but I want to come back to it. And you've said how hundreds of millions of people in the world face critical food shortages. I wonder if you could just paint us briefly a picture of hunger in the world and the causes for their suffering. You listed some there, but I wonder if you could just briefly describe those causes of world hunger for us.
Thank you, Ian. The vast majority of those people who suffer from hunger, those people live in rural areas, as we show it in the video, right? And because their primary occupation is agriculture, so that's their livelihood. And also we see people who pick, process, and pack our foods. And sometimes people even who distribute our foods, those are also people who go to bed hungry. We've seen that around the globe because of the income they get is not enough for them to be able to feed their family. So we also see more and more some increasing trends with people in cities as well. So it's not this phenomenon is no longer rural; it's also becoming urban. So we see trend of urban food insecurity, mostly among low-income people and people who don't have jobs, people who live in informal settlements, like in Nairobi. We are working there right now. We see people who work in, who live in those areas really suffering from food insecurity. So those are really the people who suffer a lot. And obviously here in the US, I'm sure we'll talk about that soon, we see the same trends. And causes, as we said earlier, just few, again, to summarize, the conflict is driving that, right? Like in, like Ethiopia, the conflict is driving farmers to flee, and then they are not producing, so they have to depend on food aids. Then we also have the climate change is becoming a big issue, lack of rain, droughts. So that's also is a big factor that is driving people into hunger, right? So conflict, climate change, and more, the war in Ukraine is also driving the food price high, and is also increasing. So people, cost of fertilizer is really increasing, cost of fuel is increasing, and so the food price is just skyrocketing, and people are not able to really afford basic foods. So those are some of the few conditions, but also you have the governments who are not investing enough. Many countries in Africa should be able to feed themselves, or at least work together, but we are not seeing that much investment going into food as well, right? So that's also part of the issues. And you have few corporations who are consolidating a lot in the food supply chain and driving you. So land issues, land grab is also a big driver. So those are some of the key factors that we see driving these issues.
Good, thank you. Yes. So now you've mentioned climate change. So let's zero in on that. Apart from the Horn of Africa, which you referenced in your film, where is climate change having the most impact currently in terms of driving hunger? And what is Oxfam doing in those regions?
Yes, climate change is having a devastating impact on farmers, especially farmers who don't have much means to really adopt technologies, because the technology also costs a lot of money. So small size farm are really taking a hit, especially farm who depend on rain-fed agriculture. So we see more frequent and more severe droughts, obviously East Africa, as I said earlier. But more and more we are seeing the same thing in West Africa as well. So farmers who entirely depend on rain-fed agriculture are really seeing loss of harvest of their livestock, and this is what we are witnessing in part of Africa. While we can do and should do more to stop climate change, we have to acknowledge that some damage has already been done, right? Because if climate change remain unchecked, estimates indicate that crop yield will continue to decline. So for instance, on maize, we are seeing a decline about 7 to 8% in terms of productivity. Rice up to 6%. Soybean, 10% decline. So those are really key issues. And few things Oxfam is doing, I can give you maybe a couple of stories. One is, for instance, in West Africa, in Burkina Faso, there is a woman, her name is Alizeta Sawadogo. She's a farmer, and she's 55 years old, widow, and mother of 8. And all her life, Alizeta has practiced agriculture and cultivated cereals, cereal, maize, millet, those things. But she has seen yields has become increasingly low due to the effect of climate change. So the seasons are gradually shifting. There is less and less rain that she sees, and dry season is becoming longer and more intense. Although the government of Burkina Faso supports smallholder farmers, but the needs are simply too great, and the resources are too few, and they too often prioritize male farmers. So they try not, they don't have all the resources, and they see farmers as men first. So women like Alizeta don't have that much support. So because of that, Oxfam and partners like Acute in Burkina Faso are supporting women like Alizeta to really help her to learn markets, gardening, and other techniques to diversify her farming business. So she has obtained a plot of land on a collective farm managed by Acute. She now is well equipped to really grow more food, more vegetables, so she can complement her cereal growing. So her, along with 50 other women, work on the site, and each one has her own plots of land, but they work on a principle of community. So Alizeta now is learning agronomic technique, organic farming, climate smart, without using too much pesticide, and how to manage the soil health. So now she believes that she is less dependent on cereal crops. She can feed her family, she can send kids to school, she can cover medical expenses, etc. So that's just one example. The second one, quickly, is we are using this agroforestry. So it is simply the integration of trees and perennial bushes on active farmlands. So this approach has demonstrated huge rewards, including for women who we organize into savings group. So we train them on those kind of technologies, and they have seen better yields, improved soil health, increased fodder for the animals, and higher income. So if taken at scale, agroforestry and reforestation are key strategy both for adaptation as well as climate mitigation. But just to finish, farmers in Africa, in Asia, in developing countries suffer most of the consequences of climate change. While we know that in countries like here in the US, the wealthy countries such as the US, Europe, etc., in Europe, contribute most to the emission, right? So we urgently as well need to play our part to change our lifestyle and our economic model, right, to really shift how we live and reduce emission, because things happening here have implications somewhere else, right? So I think we are all connected in one world. So those are a few things that we see and we try to do as Oxfam.
Very good, thank you. My next question has several parts to it. Now, Jim Morris mentioned that up to a third of the world's wheat comes from Russia and Ukraine. How has Russia's war in Ukraine exacerbated the current situation? What parts of the world are most susceptible to food shortages as a consequence of this war? And finally, will the US be able to help make up for this shortfall?
Yeah, the Ukraine crisis is really driving these issues to another level. So to this already burning fire is obviously skyrocketing food prices, right? Supply chain disruption were already important issues before the Ukraine crisis, but with most Ukrainian wheat being blockaded in ports and destroyed, the world now faces a serious crisis. So this is especially true for countries that are highly dependent on food imports from Ukraine. Just to give you an example, in Somalia, for instance, 100% of the wheat comes from Ukraine and Russia combined, right? So the country is completely dependent to eat breads and other food items. So this is really dire. And overall, as many as 25 African countries, including many least developed countries, import more than 1/3 of their wheat from the two countries, Russia and Ukraine. And 15 of them import over half. So we see a lot of African countries and some few in MENA really impacted. So in addition to facing a breakdown in global supply chain, the high cost of food is driving countries into increased debt as well, because they need to pay for more so that they can import basic food commodities. So we believe this will have a ripple effect for years to come and will force countries to cut back on other critical funding needs like healthcare, education, girls' education, social protection program, things like that. So we believe the U.S. farmer could indeed help, but obviously, this is a business. They should plan carefully and see how they can grow. But we also want to call out how they could. We should be careful not to continue to cut down on protected area, on forests, and ensure that they can use climate smart agricultural practices to avoid adding to the climate change issue, because agriculture is also a big contributor to climate change. So balance is really a balancing act, right? See how they can grow more, but do it in a way that is sustainable as well. So those will be some of our few thoughts on your question. Yeah.
Yes, thank you. So a related question. We've seen in the news recently, decisions made in countries like India, who are usually grain exporters, but who are now restricting those exports to guard against their own future food insecurity. What's going to be the impact of those sorts of decisions by countries like India?
Yeah, we saw the harmful impact of those export restrictions during the 2007-2008 crisis. If you all remember, we saw that some countries closed the border, and we understand that countries will look first to protect their own population. That's legitimate. But we need to ensure that the decisions of a single country don't make the problem worse globally. So it's not only in India, we see Indonesia or the other countries coming to do the same thing. So we plead for the market to remain open and to have more coordinated action across governments, so that we can ensure that grain market remain open and functional. Yesterday, I believe the UN has discussed these issues as well. So we really need this kind of strong coordination, strong leadership, because we don't want to add to the issues already created by the conflict in Ukraine, right? So yes, for us, this may cause more harm globally than protecting a country interest.
Yes, a slight change of direction in the questions here. So this question's on food waste in the developed world. So it has been said that there is still ample food supplies to feed the world, but what are the factors that keep it from reaching the right people at the right time?
Yeah, we do love to waste a lot here in the US, even in my own household. That's my battle with my family, they don't waste. So yeah, we believe there's indeed enough food in the world to feed everyone, in theory at least. And obviously from the statistic we saw, there's a healthy supply of food. I mean, I bet things going on in Ukraine right now, right? So, but in practice, we also have over 800 million people who go to bed hungry. So we have those kind of contrasts. A lot of food, but 800 million people going to bed hungry. So that's just a moral issues. And some countries are, as we say, are now trying to impose those kind of export ban that will also create more issues. So food are available, but if you don't allow those food to move easily, that will really continue to have hunger spots around the globe, right? So that's why we believe international markets should remain open. And if countries or private companies cannot finance the import of food, grain will not move. So again, the UN is also looking at opportunity to set up a financing mechanism that will lend money to countries that need to pay for food. And even today, there was the African Development Bank trying to also set up a fund to really enable countries to be able to buy food, to import food, or at least to get fertilizer so they can grow more food, etc. So we also see the same issues in national context. Like when food is imported to capital city, we saw breakdowns in the supply chain. This was also caused by COVID because of the lockdown. So food companies were not able to move food to the last mile where food is needed. Also due mostly to logistic issues, due to also availability of logistic to be able to drive those food, or also maybe conflict as well, because the area that the food need to go is not safe enough. The other issues is also income. Obviously, some people just don't have the money to be able to buy those food. And again, conflict is a key driver here as well. So those are the key issues. And we hear WFP, the World Food Program, saying that because of the war and the issues in Ukraine, the cost of procurement is also increasing at about, I think, 70 million per month because of all those issues. So food is there, but it's really supply chain capacity to buy, conflict issues, logistic, things like that.
It's good. So this next question, you've partially answered that. But I just want to focus a little bit more specifically on Oxfam's ability to address the problems, where you're operating around the world, given food scarcity, the cost of food, the hoarding that we've mentioned, of course, inflation that you've shown on your diagrams there. How does this affect Oxfam's ability to actually do this vital work?
Yeah. Inflation and food prices remain the primary issue in the places where we work. So yes, as I said, in countries like Kenya or Ethiopia, Somalia, or in West Africa, or in Yemen, places like that, yeah, inflation are really huge issues. And since cash is our primary modality for food assistance, so we used to give food aid a lot, but we realized that we really want to promote local economies as well, enable farmers in those countries to be able to grow. So instead of just giving people food, we are promoting more cash, so people have option if they want to buy whatever they do, and the UN is also adopting that. So since cash is the key modality for us, that means that purchasing power of those who receive cash is reduced. And also Oxfam costs are increasing, our operation cost is increasing. This also means that many more people need support given the reduction in purchasing power and the high inflation, right? And other thing we see again is the fuel and fertilizer prices increasing. Someone in Nigeria was reading, say, getting petrol, getting fuel is like digging for gold. Nigeria is a country big, sitting on big oil, but the capacity to refine the oil is not there. So they have to ship the crude oil and then buy it. So those are issues that we are facing. It is also affecting our own operations, right? How we move. And we see more and more increasing protests and which disrupt businesses, right? So when people protest, people go on the streets, also that slow down operations. So those things are really impacting our operations. And as I said earlier, the World Food Program also indicated that the pressure on the food and the cost of fuel, all those things have increased the operation cost by 70 million per month. So those are serious issues in organizations like Oxfam and many other places.
Yes, thank you. One question that we might approach from a slightly different angle there, it's, apart from the obvious response, I mean, the long-term impacts of acute hunger in those particular areas that you've identified. Can you identify some of these impacts?
Yeah, hunger is good. We, not being able to really be able to afford or eat healthy food is a big issue. So we see devastating consequences. I will just maybe pick 3 key areas because of time. So one is child malnutrition, right? So as Dr. Jim said, children who cannot have access to the right foods have lifetime consequence, right? Wasting, stunting is one key issue. And we are already seeing that across Ethiopia, Kenya, Somalia. We estimate about 1.7 million children need treatment for acute malnutrition. So for children who are acutely malnourished, the worst outcome is death, sadly. But even with treatment, they may end up stunted. So that means they will be short for their age and they will have cognitive impairment. So that's a lost generation for countries. We don't want that. That's a big impact. The second one, obviously, is the loss of livelihoods, because agriculture remains the key driver of economies in many of those countries in Africa, even here in the US, globally. So many people who are suffering hunger will migrate in search of food and better opportunities, right? So the resulting displacement disrupt lives and also means farmers cannot plant a field for the next season. So it's a ripple effect. So in some cases, what we see as well is men may migrate and leaving their family behind. And this can put women at heightened risk of gender-based violence. And we see that in many countries already. The last one is political instability this can cause. So we have seen this cycle before. when you have weak social protection program, government are not able to protect their population, their citizens, and food and energy price inflation, and government are not taking the right action, this can lead to violence. And this can result in government failing. During the last period of intense food price volatility in 2008, 2011, we saw dozens of protests and riots, which were due because of the food price issues. So those consequences are really serious, and I think we have to do everything we can to avert famine.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Lawson-Lartego. So the final question that I have in this structured part of our program tonight relates to how future hunger disasters can be averted. For instance, today I was reading, courtesy of Larry, an article about how the World Bank and the Asian Development Bank are going to be spending billions of dollars to address global fertilizer supply crisis and develop additional land for food production amid the disruptions caused by the war in Ukraine. So that lets us think about this issue. How do we avert? This is one strategy, but how else can we avert future hunger disasters?
Yeah, that's an important question. We believe we have all the tools, to be frank, right? We had the Green Revolution before, although with flaws, but obviously. So hunger, in our assessment, is human-made issue. So we can resolve it. I think we believe we have the means at our disposal to really resolve hunger for good, and obviously the SDG too, right? The world without hunger. So we have short-term action that we could take, obviously, that we are taking as Oxfam, the UN. We applaud the US government for this $5 billion to help resolve the global food issues, right? So emergency response, in making sure that some agencies like the World Food Program and many other have the resources to really respond to the current issues, right? So that's one aspect. The second one is, obviously, we know that conflict is also a key driver, conflict and war. What can we do to have peace in the world? Can we all just be peaceful? Can government work together, right? If when you have war, you have conflicts, we will continue to see hunger issues. So that's another political action governments need to really take. But obviously, from a technical perspective, we believe that investment can be done in local, shorter, climate-sensitive agricultural developments, and also in technological innovation. Many countries could do that. One advocacy we have in Africa, for instance, is for government, because they have signed up into this CADAP framework, saying that they want to spend 10% of the budget on food and agriculture. So when we do the assessment, many of them are not investing that much. You see few. So they have to invest. Government have to invest in foods in their country. They have lands, they have fertile lands. So they have to invest. They have to create the enabling environment for private sector, local private sector, maybe to partner with international companies, but really give priority to entrepreneurs to really invest in agriculture, to modernize agriculture, right? But also doing this in a way that doesn't really add to climate change, because as I said, agriculture is about 25% to 30% contributing to climate change. So how do we develop the next generation of food production in a way that is not, but those things are doable, the technology exists. I think we consumers, we have some role to play as well, right? With income increasing, people are demanding for more, meat, And can we shift our diets? Can we eat more nutritious foods? Can we eat, in a way that's contribute less to climate change? So changing consumer behavior demand will be key as well. And those things should be doable. And obviously for Oxfam, we see women, young people being at the center of those kind of investments, so they can be equipped to really be entrepreneur in their communities and have the resources, lands, access to water, input those things. So we believe the solution is within our reach if we all work together, continue to work together. And obviously, I will just give a big shout out to the people in Indiana, right? Obviously, because as Jim said before, we have the leadership of Senator Richard Lugar, who essentially said, let's do more than send food. Let's invest in food security in 2007. So, and he has been very, he was very active to get the Global Food Security Act. And there are many, Indiana, Purdue University, with a lot of technologies, and Congresswoman like Jackie Walorski. So we have lot of people, leadership from Indiana that we want to applaud here as well. And your US Senator Todd Young has also made this a major priority. So I think we see leadership coming from, a state like Indiana, Ambassador Kim Tom. So there are lots of leadership here in the US that we can really have this kind of global dialogue with communities around the globe to really make sure that we can end these issues. Okay.
Great. So now, Dr. Lawson-Lartego, we have some really fascinating questions in the chat. But before we get to those, now we're going to move to, we're going to put a local face on the issue of food insecurity. And so we're pleased to have with us this evening Dr. David J. Miner. Retired from Eli Lilly, Dave is now a full-time volunteer providing leadership for multiple organizations working to end hunger. He has been active with Bread for the World for many years at the local and national level. Dave is a board member and founding president of the Indy Hunger Network. In 2014, he received the Jefferson Award for Community Service. So Dave, if you could comment a little bit about food insecurity in central Indiana and local efforts to address its causes and consequences.
Yeah, thank you. The themes are common with what we just heard about from Dr. Lawson. They're a little bit different, of course, but the themes are common. Hunger in central Indiana is not as deep as in Yemen or Somalia, but it's very wide. And really is the word food insecurity, the term food insecurity is a good description. Most of the people who have a food need, most of those needs get met, but not always. And that constant struggle, not being sure where your next meal is going to come from, that's what the term food insecurity refers to. And we have a whole lot of people in that circumstance. In Indianapolis in 2019, at a time of record low unemployment, we had 20% of the population, so nearly 200,000 people in Marion County alone who were food insecure. That number jumped up to 28% during the pandemic, and by last year it was down to only 25%. So it's a whole lot of people, and as we've already touched on, that insecurity has very negative consequences. Kids don't do well in school. Workers aren't as productive at work, contributes to crime, raises healthcare costs. It's got a lot of negative consequences. And some of them are not quite so obvious, but we've done quite a bit of research here in Indianapolis, and there's a very strong correlation between food insecurity and the quality of the nutrition that people eat. And so the worse the food insecurity, the poorer the quality of the diet. And so it's contributing to obesity and all kinds of other problems. So why is this? Well, you could say poverty, but I'm afraid the word poverty kind of conveys maybe the wrong image. The real issue is families don't have enough dollars to go to the grocery store and buy what they need. Most of the hungry people in the US, and that's true here as well, are working families. So they're working, but they're not earning enough. What's being done? Well, we can take this in two frames. The first is in terms of providing food assistance. We're doing a really great job, actually, between the federal nutrition programs, which provide 84% of food assistance, and all the private charities, food banks, food rescue, all the other good folks kicking in 16%. We're meeting most of the need. And in fact, during the pandemic, the need for food assistance doubled, as we all know, in a very short period of time. But with changes to the federal programs, with a great outpouring for the private charity, most of that need was met. And the percentage of people who actually went hungry at the end of the day did not go up, which is just really quite remarkable. So we're doing there's more improvements to be done. That's what Indy Hunger Network focuses on. But we're doing a pretty good job on food assistance. Where we're not doing nearly enough is to reduce the number of people who need food assistance. Driving down that is a key. And of course, the cost of food is a link. It's a key link between here and world hunger. If your budget if you're right up to the edge, right, and you can barely afford to feed your family, and you don't have flexibility because nobody wants to not eat. If the price of food goes up, you don't have flexibility. So the cost of food, the impact of the war in the Ukraine is a real issue for hungry people in the US, if not as extreme of an issue as it is for people in Africa. What can we do? Support our charitable food programs. We have wonderful ones here in Central Indiana. Speak up for the federal nutrition programs that provide most of the food. And lastly, keep an eye out and speak up for approaches that will reduce the number of people who need food assistance. So that's a really quick summary, Ian, but if there are questions, I'm happy to take them.
So that's great. Thank you, Dave. Well, in this second part of the program, that's where we can address questions to both yourself and to Dr. Lawson-Lartego. So to ask a question, of course, as you know, you click on the chat icon at the bottom of your screen and type in your question. You can address it to me and rather than to everybody. And then of course, we have some prepared questions as well. And the topic as we move into the second part is, how can future hunger crises be prevented both at home and abroad? And I want to go straight to Boden Orshkovitz, that's how you pronounce your name, who has a particularly fascinating story. Dr. Lawson-Lartego. Boden, he bicycled across the USA with 35 other Harvard students in 1983 for Oxfam America. He did so for sustainable water access in the African Sahel. The project was funded by the Harvard Hunger Action Committee. And they said at that time, never again to hunger. Boden, do you want to say a little bit more about that and your reflections on that and for preventing hunger?
Thank you so much. I'm actually, first of all, I apologize for my English because my first language is Ukrainian, but I'm an American actually. And I actually was conceived in a refugee camp. And my parents eloped after World War II. So I've lived, I never thought of myself as a refugee because I've had an upper middle class life, but until President Trump started giving refugees a hard time. But let me just say something. This is an honor to speak here or talk or whatever, or respond to your question. Indiana University has done some tremendous work for Ukraine. You should know that the Kiev School of Economics, which is one of its top universities, was founded through a consortium at IU. And I believe that a good part of the Ukrainian constitution was done through IU. I remember all of this from the 90s and early 2000s, but I'd forgotten the details of it. And I think this would be worthwhile looking into because I think Ukraine needs IU. And I can tell you, I'm an Easterner, I'm a Harvard product, I'm a Columbia product. I've sent kids to every Ivy League school from Ukraine. But IU has a very special Slavics department, which is very diverse, very deep, and it can be very helpful in this regard. You know, there are many issues that Harvard can't solve, Columbia can't solve, because of a variety of things. You know, I'm not sure if IU is a land grant school, but it you know, it is a statewide school, and I don't think it is, but you know, it has the resources. Now, I'm actually a physician. I'm a clinical immunologist, and I started a program to address climate change, and and I'm looking at the long-term issues, and I have some wonderful ideas, but I can't do everything myself. So if there's anybody here who wants to help me, I'll be glad to speak with you for hours. I'll probably exhaust you with all my ideas. So I warn you, but actually I have a project that I think will immediately get the support of the International Monetary Fund, because I know how to develop talent, and we can very quickly develop talent that will address climate change and will address, you know, hunger, you know. And believe me, I bicycled across the United States because I had been in Nepal, and I had gone on a trek, and I had barefoot porters who carried my backpack. When I signed up for it, I had no idea, and I felt I had to give back in kind, and I thought bicycling across the United States. So that, you know, I think I can do that, and anybody who wants to contact me, I'll be glad to do so. Thank you so much for giving me.
Yes, Bowden, if you could send me your
I
email.
did.
All right, I'll have to make sure that
Well, I sent it to Larry Simino, and he's responded.
Very good, very good. All right, thank you, Bowden. Fascinating, and I look forward to future connections with you on this subject. Is Adrienne still online? She had several questions. Adrienne, are you there? If not, I would want to relay one of them. What it refers to both Dave and to Dr. Oh, yes, Adrienne, yes, please.
Yeah. So I had two questions. One of the, thank you to all the speakers. It's a very important conversation tonight, obviously. The first question for Dr. Lawson-Lartego was about microcredit loans. I know they've been very helpful in some ways with women, providing opportunities for entrepreneurship. So I was wondering if Oxfam is involved with that in any way. And the other was, we hear a lot about compassion fatigue, and I was wondering what was giving him hope at this time, and some specific, some of you have talked about specifics as far as sort of call to action, but I think at a program like this, it's also possible for the participants to have that sense of compassion fatigue as well. So if there are maybe one or two or three things that any of the presenters could talk about in terms of what Hoosiers could do within the next maybe 3 to 6 months, maybe tomorrow, something specific that we can do. So those were a couple questions I tossed out, mainly for Dr. Lawson-Lartego, but really anyone that wants to speak to this. Thank you.
Can I come in? Yeah, can I respond now, or want to get some more?
Yes, please. Yes, please.
Yeah, thank you. Let me do this. Yeah, thanks so much for the question. If I get the name correct, Adrienne. Yeah, totally. Oxfam has been involved with microloans, microcredits, but mostly we really educated women around the globe on saving first and then loans. So we have what we call a savings group around the globe that we have pioneered and is now viral actually in many places around the globe. So we continue to do that. It has become quite a good ground to bring women together, sometimes men as well, but the vast majority are women who they can learn skill, entrepreneurship skill, but also talk about social issues, like gender issues, how do you advocate together to really have access to resources? One example from Mali is helping those women organized into savings group as well to use their savings to invest in agriculture and adopting new agricultural approaches like this agroforestry. We've seen quite like arid area which have become more like green space, and they are growing more food. So yes, we still believe in that. It's been extremely effective, and we continue to really promote that. And yeah, I think the compassion and the fatigue, those are really key good point actually. One thing we did just before yesterday was really a call to action for people like you to really call the senator or the hospice representative, ready to continue to put pressure on them to do their part, right? So that's something we do a lot of advocacy. Our CEO a couple of weeks ago went to Washington, D.C. to meet with most of those policymakers in person. So so having your voice with us to really, call attention to the issues, and even thanking them as well, thanking your representative in Indiana, because most of the time they are dealing with so many issues. So just for them to get a call from you saying, hey, thank you for passing this Ukraine bill, the 40 billion, and in which 5 billion is devoted to food. Thank you for doing that. We believe that can really go a long way. One other thing we are promoting is we have not started yet in the US. We hope to start soon, but in 6 cities around the globe is also to really help people to grow foods in the backyard, in having community garden, and shortening the supply chain, right? Growing healthy, nutritious foods, and doing education on that. So we have quite a lot that can get people engaged, and also just brainstorming about ideas. If you have ideas, I noted the name of the previous speaker, Mr. Bowden, Dr. Bowden. We would love to get in touch with you if you have ideas that you want to share with us. We are all ears. We want to cooperate with you, solutions, based on your experience. So yeah, we want to engage you as much as possible.
Thank you. I'd just like to ask Dave if you could respond to that too. The hope question, the compassion question.
Yeah. I think Dr. Lawson-Lartego had a really good answer there. I've studied, the response to hunger both internationally and in detail here in the U.S. And the thing we need the most is we need advocacy. We need the voices, as he said. It's surprising how few people actually speak up about anything. And it's also surprising sometimes, if it's not some really hot button issue, that a modest number of voices can swing a difference. I was involved in a issue several years ago, and 10 of us contacted, it was Senator Coates at that time, about one particular matter, and it moved $35 million to African farmers. You can't I couldn't raise $35 million if I had the rest of my life, but my several emails moved significant resources. So the big thing I think we need the most is, and a group like folks who listen into ICWA are thoughtful folks who are in a good position to be advocates. So that's my main answer. Donor fatigue is tougher. Really, I think I worry about this actually, because if the underlying, speaking about the U.S. situation, if the underlying number of people continues to grow, then the demand for all of us to donate to the food banks and everything goes as well, and eventually people do tire. So I do think getting on with, as my food bank friends refer to it, shortening the line. We need to spend some time on shortening the line.
Right. Larry, do we have time for any further questions, or I think we've just about reached the end, haven't we?
You could take one more if you have a good one, and we want to make sure we finish by half past the hour. So
Yes.
go ahead.
Well, there's a couple in the chat, and I just got one here that builds on Jim Morris's question. He raised the point of the place of faith-based organizations in hunger alleviation on the world stage, and that ties in with your one of your points, Larry, about the funding from, say, the US government as well. So for both locally and internationally, maybe you just want to talk a little bit about the support that you're getting, where that's coming from. Dave,
Yeah, maybe I'll
want to
start, and then so if you look at the charitable side of it, I mentioned that most of the food comes from the federal nutrition programs. But if you look at the charitable side, Indianapolis has 185 food pantries. And 95% are faith-based organizations. So the faith community is playing a huge, and that's not just, it is, many of them are Christian, but there's also Muslim and Jewish. The Sikhs have been very involved. So the faith community is playing an important role.
That's fascinating. Dr. Lawson-Lartego?
Yeah, we do work with faith-based organizations here in the US, but also globally. Just last week, you'll see behind me, we have now this vision that the future is equal. So one thing we do in Oxfam is we publish what we call the Inequality Index, just to show, especially at the country level, right? So we issued one last week on the Southern Africa countries, like South Africa, Mozambique, Zimbabwe. So we organized a panel of speakers, and obviously we made sure that we invited faith-based leaders as well, because they are very influential. So for them to also understand the issues of inequality, the issues of hunger, and the underlying factors, right? So that they can help us to move those issues forward. Along with policymakers, we invite parliament, we invited people from governments. So it was a very vibrant panel, and so we work with faith-based organizations a lot because they have so much influence, and people of faith still, want to do goods, and we really enjoy the support so that we can take our messages and advocacy forward. So that's extremely important to us.
Yes. So now, Ray, did you want to pose your question? You talk about the long-term factors perpetuating hunger. Of course, the obvious one, I think, is population growth,
Sure.
which continues on its upward spiral.
Sure. I was thinking, being a senior person here, we've been hearing about world hunger for decades, and obviously issues like the war in Ukraine and global warming and so forth are relatively new issues, and the issue of hunger, world hunger, has been around for a long time. I guess I was kind of curious, what are some of the longer term issues that really contribute to the issue of hunger? And so anyhow, I was just kind of wanted to see that from a more long-term perspective, as opposed to thinking about what's just happening this year.
Thanks. Dr. Lawson-Lartego, would you like to address that?
Yeah, when you look back, maybe 5 years, 7 years.
I'm talking 30, 40 years, 50 years.
Yeah, but my point is we were seeing a decline in number of people going to bed hungry, right? It went from like close to billion, going to like 600 million. So we see sharp decline. But the key factors, again, as I share in my pitch, is there are a number of things, but I think conflict is just one. Because when you have conflict, when you have war, people have to flee. People flee, and when those people are farmers who were supposed to grow foods, it's clear that food is not being produced, right? So that's one cause in many countries like Ethiopia, for instance, they have these issues between within countries in Tigray, and so it's causing a lot of people to really flee the country, or at least those geographies. Yemen is another example, Afghanistan. So conflicts, instability is a big one, obviously. The other factor we are seeing more and more is the climate change. The climate is changing for many of those farmers. And as we showed in our video earlier, three consecutive, rainy season that did not happen. And the fourth one is not sure. So that means people are not getting the right amount of rain, and they don't have the technology, right? They don't have the technology to capture water, to have irrigation dam. Government are not investing. So that's another key factor. So you have conflict, you have climate change, and for the past 2 years, we also seen COVID has also increased the vulnerability of many people in those countries, because the lockdown, even in China, it continues. So supply chain is not moving, people livelihoods, people lost their job, they don't have protection as we do in the US. Government don't have the means. So those are key factors, and governments, again, in many countries are not still investing enough in agriculture. They don't have enough on research institute who can really, or university who can do the right research, etc. So those are key factors, that we continue to see. We believe those things are solvable, but it takes political will, to be frank.
Thank you. Now, apologies to those who I haven't been able to get to, but we do have one last question, Larry, before we hand back to you. And Betty, please.
We were talking about faith-based groups. Within the last few years, I spent some time in seminary, and I think one of the best things I got out of it was hanging with a lot of the young people who want to be part of a church, what they call the new church. And churches, Dave, you're right, churches are absolutely critical to providing the food for the food banks, because this is a way for people in those congregations to be connected to doing something about it. The food banks are so dependent on people contributing that food, and they're very good at following directions. And of course, COVID hurt that a great deal. But the young people in seminary today talk about the new church, and they want to go deeper than the food. They really want to get into what we've been hearing about tonight. What is causing hunger? We can continue bringing food and continue bringing the bags, but what if we don't get to what is causing this hunger? It's like with climate change. I just think sometimes we need to get out of their way and really give them the reins and see, what will you do about climate change? What will you do about this hunger? Because they have some ideas that aren't terribly radical, but they're getting tired of just bringing the food. They want to stop the systemic reasons that's causing the hunger. So there's hope.
Thank you, Betty. That is definitely hope. Yeah.
Well, and you probably see that also, Dave. You probably work with a lot of these young people, and it's got to be very inspiring, because I think the work you do there has to be some frustration and depression with it. But these young people must give you some kind of hope as well, that we may not see it. We may not live long to see what they're going to do, but it'll be interesting.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, thank you, Betty. Thank you, Dave. Thank you, Dr. Laté Lawson-Lartego. Larry, back to you.
Yeah, we could obviously continue talking about this. It's not only an important issue, but it's an issue, as was said earlier, that people feel strongly about. They connect with it. They don't want to see people go hungry. So we can't come up with all the solutions here, but it's good to know that there are good people working on this issue. We may not be able to help everybody, but to the extent that you can help some people, they appreciate it. So as I mentioned before, this is our last speaker program of the 2021-22 season. And we hope you've enjoyed our programming and that we've helped you make a little more sense of the events that have shaped or racked our world over the last year. So plan to join us next season, and please consider joining and supporting the Indiana Council on World Affairs. we'll keep you posted on some of the casual cultural events this summer around lunch and dinner tour programs at the local ethnic restaurants. It's a way to familiarize yourself with some of the other folks who have settled in our community and and learn about it from sharing food around the table. So I've put in the chat the contact information for Dr. Bohdan Orishkovich. Am I pronouncing it right? I hope so. So he left a phone number and an email address. If you want to poke down and chat, you can find that now. If you want more information about all of our programs on the Indiana Council on World Affairs, our website is indianaworld.org, and you'll find the recording of this program and previous programs available on that site. Also, you'll get that tomorrow. And if you have any comments about our program, ways to improve our programs, ideas that you'd like to see from us, let me know. Send some information back to me. We cherish that. We value that interaction of ideas. So now, on behalf of our Indiana Council on World Affairs, I want to really thank distinguished speaker, Dr. Laté Lawson-Lartego of Oxfam America for spending the evening with us. Thank Jim Morris for his introduction. I want to thank Dave Miner from the Indy Hunger Network for spending time with us this evening. Ian McIntosh, our interlocutor extraordinaire, and all of you who joined our program this evening. So good to see you. I love seeing your faces. And finally, in the immortal words of Dr. Seuss, which are so relevant in so many situations, don't cry because it's over, smile because it happened. So good evening. I hope to see you all again in September, many in person, the rest of you right here on Zoom Central, and peace to everyone. Have a good night. Thanks to everyone for the program and for the season. Good night now.
Thank you.